Welcome back to Rules Engagement. I apologize for the short delay, guys. I had a small technical issue, but it's all resolved now. Let's jump straight into the first replay of the day. It's going to be myself versus Soppy, and I'm going to tell you guys how to properly critique a build. So there's a couple steps that are important to this. The first one is going to be to make sure you can streamline the first 10 minutes or so of your build, the opening part of it. Then you want to look at the strengths and weaknesses of your build, and then you want to make sure that you're playing to maximize the strengths of your build and utilize it to its fullest potential. So let's jump right into the replay here and talk about how to streamline the first 10 minutes. So there's a couple things I'm going to talk about right off the bat. And one is notice the Pylon Forge location. This is something that some Protoss players do. I took it myself from Grubby. He started it a while back. You don't want to do it consistently because there is a trade-off to putting your first Pylon and Forge in your main. The advantage is that it saves you a bit of money when you do this. But when you build your first Pylon and Forge inside your base, it's a little bit risky. And the reason this is because your first cannon comes up a little bit later because you have to get that second Pylon down before you can get that cannon started. So it is a trade-off. It's slightly riskier, but you do save a little bit of money. And you might be wondering, how do you save money? You're still getting the same buildings in the same order. You're still going Pylon, Nexus, Forge, Pylon Cannon. The reason why you save money is because the first Pylon, you're not sending a probe all the way down here and building that Pylon. You're keeping it right next to your worker line to minimize the amount of times your probes are off minerals. The other disadvantage, of course, you're scouting a little bit later with this build. It's an entirely trade-off situation. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but if you want to mess around with it, feel free to do that. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is the timing on when I take my third base. So we're going to just fast forward this. It's standard. You know, just spend all the chrono boosts on probes after Forge Expo unless you're trying to do a Warp Gate rush. I'm not trying to do a Warp Gate rush with this build, so just all the chrono on probes, keep macroing out, macroing out, macroing out. And then there's a lot of different ways to play this, but I'm going to talk about my specific build and the timing of my third for this type of macro-oriented build. So right at the point of time I start the third, let's take a look and see exactly what's happened so far. So there's a couple of considerations you want to have when you time your third base. The first one that everyone thinks about is how safe is it to take a third base now? And that's the worst consideration, because you know what? It's always safe to take a third base. As long as you know your opponent went third before gas, you can take a third base off a single stalker at like that 530 mark, and it's still perfectly safe once you get down your building placement and once you optimize that build. It's impossible to take a third in a risky fashion in PvZ, as long as your opponent went for that 3 hatch build. Even if they didn't, you can still take it quickly and just give it up if they attack. I don't even worry about safety at all about your third base timing. The two things to consider are 1, your economy, and 2, your tech. So the faster you take it, the more economy you have. But if you take it fast, you have to get a bunch of warp gates, you have to build the walls up, you have to make sure you have enough sentries to defend everywhere, and all these investments slow down your tech. So the advantage I'm getting from expanding around the 840 mark, I think is when I start this Nexus. Let's see, 12 seconds. Actually, more like 835 mark, 837. If I expand at that point in time, it's not quite as optimal for economy purposes, right? But the advantage is that I have a pretty decent tech. If we take a look at my tech, one thing is I have robotics done, and I've got an immortal out here to help defend my third, and I've already scouted him with an observer. And the importance of this observer, it tells me, is he massing roaches to try to kill me early? If he is, I need to get my walls set up, I need to cut probes, get a bunch of gateways, chrono boost out immortals, let's go Sentry Immortal Stalker defense, and I'll just win because he's invested so much into that attack as long as I can defend it. Is he going for muteless? If he is, I need to be getting Blink, make sure I have cannon defenses, get a second squad of Blink Stalkers, etc. Or is he going for Infestor Hive Tech, which is what I discovered he's doing through this scouter. I don't know it yet, but I have a pretty good idea just from the Evo Chambers and the Zergings I've seen coming out here in the Lair Tech. It could be muteless right now, I'm not 100% sure, but it's most likely Infestors at this point in the game. So the tech allows me to have more information, and the other thing it does is because I'm getting this Twilight Council fast, it allows me to get really far ahead in upgrades. So the third timing, you have to consider the economy and attack and which one you want to prioritize. This game, I'm prioritizing my tech a little bit more than my economy. So that's kind of considerations on how to time your third base. The other thing we want to look at when you're trying to optimize the first 10 minutes of the build is how to improve your chrono boost usage. So we look right now, I have a bunch of chrono boosts here saved up. and some here saved up. And the reason I haven't used it is because I want to basically see what he's doing so I know how to allocate it. I said earlier, if it's roaches, I got to allocate it to immortals. If it's infestor tech, I want to allocate it to probes. And if it's muteless, probably to probes as well. Of course, actually, I also want to make sure I allocate most of it to maintaining these upgrades and keep this upgrade going fast. This twilight council is already done, so this forge should be chrono boosted. This is a little bit of a mistake on my part. So when you're thinking about how to improve chrono boost usage, there's two ways to do it. One is to be faster, right? Everyone knows it. If you're better at multitasking, a little faster, you're gonna have a little bit better chrono boost usage. But the other thing that can help you a lot is if you know what you want to prioritize chrono boost wise before you even come up to the decision of what to chrono boost, you get energy, then you're gonna automatically be faster. So right now, as soon as this observer sees things, I should be thinking, okay, now I want to chrono boost probes right now. And in fact, I see the infestation pad. I definitely want to be chrono boosting probes and upgrades. So I should, exactly, there goes the upgrades. I should be chrono boosting probes right here. This is a little bit of a mistake. And the reason why is because I'm hesitating. I'm chrono boosting the robotics facility. And this is not what I scouted. This is actually contradicting what I scouted. I've had my observer on his rally point. I've seen no roaches come out. Only some speedings. There's no reason to be chrono boosting this immortal out. That should be probes and upgrades. I should make sure there's upgrades constantly going, and I should make sure I'm chrono boosting the probes. So, knowing what you want to chrono boost is going to improve your chrono boost usage, and you want to know it before you even are coming around to chrono boosting it. You want to know, okay, I have no energy right here, and I have like one chrono boost right here, but I should already know what my next 3 chrono boosts should be allocated to, because that'll improve my efficiency. Because then you're instead of getting energy then making a decision, you're making a decision so the instant you get energy, you can utilize it in the most optimal manner. Now another thing here is you notice that I'm long distance mining for my third. And this is something I often do once I feel like I have enough minerals, miners at my main and natural. So we can see here I have 19 workers mining minerals at my main, and what do I have here? I have 20 at my natural. And I really shouldn't be, I should have more at each base before I start to long distance mine. The reason I do it is because I'm kind of lazy, and I want to make sure that I instantly have guys at the third to instant it finishes. And I don't lose that much money from only having 19 at the main instead of having it up to 24. But I still should go up to 24 and then long distance mine. The reason why I do want to long distance mine some is because past 24 probes on minerals, you gain no benefit of having more workers on minerals. So, you know, long distance mining mines very little, but very little is still better than nothing. That being said, I should still go up to 24 workers per base before I long distance mine. But then, of course, once the third gets up, I want to move a couple over. And having to remember that and dealing with that in the middle of the game is sometimes a little bit of a hassle. Me, out of the sake of laziness and not playing quite optimally, this game I decided to just have them long distance mine once I got up to 20 on each base. And that's something I sometimes do, but it's a bad habit. I would not recommend doing that at home. Just a little note there. When you're critiquing your build, look at the efficiency of the way you use your workers as well. In this case, I have them divided between the main and natural very smoothly, but I should have a few more to main and natural and then transfer them over. Actually, probably telling them to start transferring over right about now. So actually, at this point, it's okay. They're mining because that's literally just seconds from being finished. So now we talked about a couple things I could use to optimize the first 10 minutes. A little bit better chrono boost allocation. Talking about how the forge placement, maybe it's a little bit risky. And then also about how to utilize the probes better. Now we're going to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of this build. So as we go forward in this, when you want to look at the strengths and weaknesses of a build, there's a couple things we're going to look at. One, is the unit composition I'm going for strong or weak, right? Let's actually fast forward and see how I progress with this build. It's not clear, right? I'm actually going for a bunch of immortals, sentries, zealots, and archons. And the fact that I'm cutting out stalkers makes my army much stronger against roaches. Makes me weaker to muteless, but this is something I would scout and react to. And it makes me stronger against infestors. Like, stalkers are really only good against muteless, and that's about it. Or they're good if you want to just build a whole build around them for a much earlier timing. For a later game battle, you only want them for muteless or broodlords. Or if you can fight your opponent before they get infestors, then blink stalkers can be very, very effective. So there's a lot of really good blink stalker timings. But for a later in the game timing like this, this composition, not having stalkers is fine. But it's not a particularly amazing composition. It's hard to tell if that's a strength or weakness of the build. Is it powerfully in the competition late game or not. I don't know. The economy of the build. Well, I didn't rush economy, but I've got 79 workers. I'm about to start my 4th. The economy is not amazing, but it's not bad either. I mean, I could have started 4th at probably about 1130 if I optimized the build a little better for that regard. Or I could also have gotten less probes and went for 3 base time. So it's kind of middle of the road in composition and in economy. Neither strong nor weak in those regards, but the one big strength this build has is its mobility. And the reason why it's so mobile is because of the warp gate count. So we can look here. Actually, these are probably about to turn to warp gates. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or I don't know. I've got like 14 warp gates if you add up these 3 and these 2 and all the ones being built. So I'm going to be at 14 warp gates. So that's the strength of the build, is the mobility. So I want to play to the strength of the build. And to really utilize that, the warp prisons are great. Spreading out the map is great. But what I need to do is I need to make sure that to fully utilize mobility, all these little sections of units, right? Wherever I have armies and I'm trying to spread them out, each little army needs to be able to trade very cost efficient against Zerglings. So to fully utilize this mobility, I need to make all my little squads of units Zergling proof. Basically immune to the effects of being swarmed over by Zerglings, or at the very least making sure the Zerglings are going to trade costs inefficiently if they try to engage me. So one thing we can look at right here, this little squad, this is not very Zergling proof, right? It's just 6 or 7 zealots. And the other thing is, I haven't been prioritizing my chrono boost enough on this +3 weapons. This should be done by now. 14 minutes in, this should be done. But I've missed a couple of chrono boosts on it, and that causes my army to be weaker versus Zerglings. And so again, these squads aren't as cost efficient versus Zerglings. I can't consider him Zergling proof. He has 2 armor. I only have 2 attack on these zealots. Let's fast forward here a little bit. I only have 2 attack on his zealots, so it's going to take him 3 attacks to kill 3 attacks to kill the Zerglings. If I had this done, they would kill them in 2 attacks and be much more cost efficient. So this warp in here is not at all a good warp in. In fact, it would have been much better if I just warped it in with my army to make my army more Zergling proof. As we look here, I'm able to try to force a bunch of infested Terran eggs, but Suppy does a great job of actually surrounding a section of my units with those eggs, and so I lose a lot more zealots that I would have really loved to be able to replace, have them in my army, because right now, this attack here is the main attack. I feint from one direction and utilize mobility to come around back here, and the mobility isn't in the speed of the units. It's in the fact that because I have so many warp gates, I was instantly able to make this army wherever I wanted to be. I made this army much stronger. Whereas I also could have been warping units here and making another army much stronger up there. But I choose to put it over in this section of the map. So this is a little bit of a strength here. And now I use the mobility to push in from this angle. And this is another situation. If I didn't waste those 7, 8 zealot warp-ins, 7 or 8 more zealots here would have been much, much, much stronger. I should have been playing more to the strengths of my build, making sure if I do split my army, every segment is Zergling proof. And then again, here's another little bit of a missed warp in. I'm thinking I want to flank him from this direction. That's not a good idea. I'm trying to use the mobility in a situation where he's already committed his entire Zergling army to battle me here. I needed those zealots in this army to help reinforce this angle, because a warp in here is not going to be very effective. So overall, all my forces I'm making are not particularly Zergling proof, because I have zealots that don't have an upgrade advantage. So Zerglings actually are cost efficient against my zealots because he's the one with the upgrade advantage. And I have Immortals, Sentries, and Archons. These 3 units, none of them are particularly great against Zerglings. Archons are okay, but they're still worse than mass zealots are even. What I would really want to do is I should upgrade Storm to help versus Zerglings and Infestors. Because as soon as I get Storm, I'm very cost efficient versus these mass infested Terran plays, and I'm also very cost efficient versus Zerglings. And then all of a sudden I can be doing mobility plays with the warp in over here. I could warp in 2 Templar and then 8 Zealots, and then wait for those Templar to get Storms each and then move in. Over here, when I attacked on this angle, it could have been Storming the Infested Terrans. Down here, again, the same thing, Storming the Infested Terrans and the Zerglings. Storm would have been extremely helpful because my army, I was trying to play a mobility-based strategy, but his most mobile unit, the Speedling, would beat my army because I had no strong way to deal with Speedling. So that wasn't a very well thought out army composition in regards to focusing on the strength of the build, which was mobility. And then, of course, I need to focus more on chrono boosting upgrades for the same reason. If you're going to focus on mobility play against a Zerg, you have to make sure that your armies are going to absolutely dominate Zerglings, which means you need either massive upgrade advantages, which I didn't have, although I probably could have with better chrono boost allocation, and or you always have Storm at your disposal. Because the Archon, Zealot, Immortal type army is not particularly great. Archon, sure, they can one-shot a Zergling, but each Archon costs you 400 resources, and to kill a Zergling every shot is not particularly amazing. They only kill one Zergling a shot. The splash damage is small enough that the neighboring Zerglings actually just take half damage, and then it'll take a couple shots to really weaken all those up. So you really would have rather had Storm here. Yes, it costs a little bit of money. Maybe instead of having 4 Archons, I would have had 6 Templar. But 6 Templar and 6 Storms would have been much more effective than I could morph them into 3 Archons later down the road. So to kind of recap on as I'm going through this replay, a couple of the most important things are to streamline the build a little bit better, not long distance mine from the third base. That was a mistake. It's kind of a mistake of laziness there. The third time I think was good for my build. The whole point of that third timing though was to get an advantage in upgrades, and I needed to really pay more attention to allocating chrono boost to that forge in order to get that advantage. That was another oversight there, was not focusing enough of my attention on that chrono boost allocation. And then we're going to talk about the strength of the build was mobility, but I need to make an army composition to hard counter Zerglings so I can really utilize that mobility to just be able to attack him everywhere, and my squads that attack, he can't respond too well because his Zergling defense forces are not able to deal with them. So those are probably the three biggest things to improve there when I critique the build. Is one, the economy could have been a little bit better if I didn't long distance mine, more chrono boost on Forge, and getting a better anti-Zergling unit composition. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with the next part of this replay, talking about how you can deal with Brood Lords late game in Protoss vs. Zerg.